Hey everyone, today we're going to walk through a really interesting document from an author named Jonathan. He's written this piece that's a kind of hypothetical look ahead, as if we're 6 months into a potential second Trump term. It focuses specifically on the Department of Justice. Now, our job here is simply to lay out what Jonathan presents in his research, plain and simple. We're just breaking down his arguments. So let's get right into it. Right off the bat, Jonathan frames his entire analysis with this one question. He's basically taking this idea of a successful first 6 months and immediately challenging it, asking, successful for whom exactly? It really sets a critical tone for everything that follows in the document. So, to really get a handle on his argument, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. First, we'll look at his main thesis. Then, we'll dive into his claims about an anti-Semitism pretext. After that, we'll cover the specific people he calls out, unpack a scandal he calls ice blocker, and finally, we'll see how he tries to tie it all together. Okay, so let's start with Jonathan's core argument. What's really interesting is that he doesn't begin by talking about what the DOJ has done. Instead, he kicks things off with a pretty long list of things he claims it has failed to do. And here's that list, according to his document. He sees this as a rundown of broken promises or, at the very least, completely neglected issues. He's pointing to things like COVID accountability, help for small businesses, releasing those long-awaited JFK and Epstein files. And he argues that this inaction is what's really driving a lot of public frustration. So this brings us to the absolute heart of Jonathan's thesis. He argues that the DOJ's stated mission, this intense focus on fighting anti-Semitism, isn't the real story. He claims it's actually a pretext, a cover story, for actions that are really designed to shield certain powerful groups from any kind of real investigation. So, how does he try to prove this pretty bold claim? Well, to build his case, he turns to statistics. He uses a set of numbers to argue that the government's response to anti-Semitism, particularly on college campuses, is completely out of proportion to the actual problem as he lays it out. First up, he throws out the number 8. According to his research, that's how many separate congressional hearings were held on the topic of anti-Semitism just since the start of the year. Then, he contrasts those 8 hearings with this number, 144. In his document, this is the total number of anti-Semitism cases on college campuses that are apparently the focus of all this high-level attention. And this is how he tries to put it all in perspective. He gives this final, massive number, over 19 million college students in the entire country, to frame those 144 cases. His whole point here is to make the reader ask, wait, does the response really match the scale of the issue here? Jonathan then makes sure to define a key term. He points to the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, as the group providing the official definition of anti-Semitism that's being used. And he makes a specific point in his document to highlight its connection with the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, so after laying out the big picture with stats, Jonathan's document gets very personal. It zooms in on specific people inside this hypothetical DOJ, and he makes some really serious claims against figures like Attorney General Pam Bondi and a senior counsel he names Leo Terrell. He really focuses in on Leo Terrell here, laying out what he calls a massive conflict of interest. Jonathan claims Terrell's official job as head of the anti-Semitism task force is to, in his words, identify, dox, and destroy critics. But then he alleges Terrell is connected to a speakers bureau whose clients include the very people he says the DOJ should be investigating. He even digs into Terrell's past with the NAACP, linking it back to one of its co-founders. Next up, Jonathan dives into what he describes as this huge scandal brewing right inside the DOJ. He's dubbed it the ice blocker scandal, and he claims it points to a direct cover-up of some serious wrongdoing that goes way up the corporate ladder. So according to Jonathan, here's how he says it all went down. First, this app called Ice Blocker gets made, and he claims its purpose is to interfere with ICE operations. Second, it turns out the creator's wife, Carolyn Feinstein, is a forensic auditor at the Department of Justice. Third, she gets fired almost instantly once his connection goes public. But for Jonathan, that's not justice. He alleges her quick firing was actually step 1 of a much bigger cover-up. And this is where he really hammers his point home. He claims that it is, and this is a direct quote, literally impossible that this was all just some simple oversight. He argues the connections are just too deep for the administration to have been in the dark, and he points to other figures like Bikram Bakshi of Optum as another link in this whole chain. So in the last part of his document, Jonathan tries to pull all these different threads together. You've got the DOJ's focus, the accusations against specific officials, the ice blocker scandal, and he weaves them into what he calls a single, massive web of connections. And who does he put at the absolute center of this web? According to his theory, it's these two individuals, Daniel and Margaret Munzer Loeb. He basically paints them as the central hub connecting the worlds of high finance, tech, intelligence, and politics. To back this up, his document lists all these different affiliations he claims they have. He links them to everything from political campaign funding to a venture capital firm that he claims works with an Israeli intelligence unit, all the way to high-level roles at McKinsey, the EcoHealth Alliance, and a big charter school network. It's a lot. He then zooms in even further on Daniel Loeb's firm, Third Point Ventures. Jonathan makes a point to highlight a few of their investments he sees as red flags. He claims the firm was an early backer of FTX, has huge stakes in companies like Alibaba and Amazon, and is a co-investor in the data company Snowflake. Jonathan really doesn't mince words, especially at the end. He wraps up his whole argument with these blunt statements, like this one aimed right at Leo Terrell. He's not leaving any room for doubt about how he sees it. In his document, he flat out labels the whole situation as bribery. And that pretty much brings us to the end of Jonathan's analysis. He positions his own document as an attempt to, in his words, clean out the riffraff. The final, really provocative question he leaves hanging is whether this complex web he claims to have exposed is a problem that can be fixed, or if this is just the way things are now. And that's where he leaves it.